Hello friends, thank you for watching this video. I am Mohamad and today we're going to be discussing a full life cycle of our application. So we're going to be discussing a front end as well as the back end. And for the front end, we're going to be utilizing Blazor. So we're going to be creating a Blazor WASM application where we're going to be implementing a CRUD operation. As well, we're going to be creating a web API, which is going to be serving that Blazor application. As well, on top of all of that, we're going to be seeing how we can integrate our API with Postgres. So in this video, we're going to be creating a front-end app, which is going to be the Blazor application, a backend, which is going to be our API, as well as we're going to be connecting into a Postgres application. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe. It will really help the channel. As well, if you'd like to support me, please consider supporting me on Patreon or buying me a coffee. Now, grab your cup of coffee and let's get started. So before we get started, let's discuss what Blazor is. And we can think about it as a front-end solution. So similar to what we have as React, as Angular, as Vue, those softwares are basically those frameworks rely heavily on JavaScript. On the other hand, Blazor is a front-end solution, but we can actually utilize C# in order for us to actually write our front-end stuff. So for example, if we want to connect to an API, if we want to do any kind of logic, we can utilize actually C# instead of actually utilizing JavaScript. So Blazor is basically a solution from Microsoft in order for us to create a front-end application utilizing C#. And Blazor is very powerful. It got introduced with .NET 5 and basically it kept on getting more and more and more features, specifically within the latest release of .NET 7. If you need much more information about the Blazor, please let me know and I'll create a much more in-depth video about it, but please put it in the comments down below. And now that we have covered a bit of the basics of what Blazor is, now let's get started and we can actually see it from there, how we can actually utilize it and how we can actually build our front-end application. So let's get started. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to make sure that our Postgres is installed. I have already installed it, but I'm gonna take you through the installation process if we're utilizing Mac. So basically we're going to be utilizing Homebrew to install it. So inside our terminal, all we need to do is just type brew, install Postgres, and basically here I'll be able to actually install it. You can see that it's telling me that it's installed. And then basically in order for me to run the service, I need to put the brew services start PostgreSQL. It's going to tell me that it's already started. And if I need to restart it, I need to restart it, but in general, that it's all running as it should be. But once you do install the Postgres, make sure that it's actually starting. Sometimes you need to start it manually, and sometimes you need to input your password in order for it to basically run whenever your computer starts, but that's fine. So once we have done all of that, now we need to create our database, and we're going to be utilizing the Postgres command line interface, the CLI, in order for us to do that. So inside our terminal here, all we need to do is put PSQL Postgres, and now you can see here that we went from my normal terminal into the Postgres terminal, and basically because we went into the Postgres terminal here, we are able to directly communicate with our database server. So I'm gonna say here is create database, and I'm gonna call this sample Blazor DB1, anything that I want. So I put create, I mistyped create, so let me fix that. And now here we can see that I got my database created. The next step is I just need to grant it to one of the users that I have. So I'm just gonna grant connect on database. It's kind of called sample Blazor DB1, and I need to specify to which user I want to give this access to. It's going to be to, and I have my user is called Mohamad, and that's it. So now we can see that I got the grant command, which just makes it perfect for me. And then once I have done that, all I need to do is just exit. Perfect. So that's all the setup that I need to do through my SQL. So all I did here is basically just make sure that my SQL server is installed successfully. Postgres server is installed successfully. And then I basically was able to create a database. And once I created the database, I granted access to the user in order for me to be able to manage it. So the next step is I need to install a couple of tools for the entity framework. And then we're going to be creating our application. So inside my terminal here, all I'm going to put is .NET tool install -- global .NET-EF, and this will basically allow me to install the .NET tool, the entity framework tool for .NET inside my machine. I have already installed it, so that's why I'm seeing this error. But if I need to update it, so all I need to do is just change the install here to update. And we can see I have the latest version, which is exactly what I want. So now that we have done that, the next step is for me, I need to create my application, and that's going to be very simple. So in order for me to create my application, first I want to navigate to where where I want to create it. So I'm going to go to the desktop, work, learning, Blazor. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call it let's say Blazor app 2 v2, for example. I'm gonna go to this Blazor, and then here what I'm gonna be doing, I'm gonna create my application. I'm just gonna put .NET, and in order for me to create my application, I'm gonna be utilizing my .NET SDK new keyword, and here I'm gonna pass some parameters which is gonna allow me to basically create my client side as well as my server side for my Blazor application, as well as a shared library. So within a single command, I'm able to create the client side, which is gonna be my Blazor application. I'm gonna be creating my server side, which is gonna be the APIs that I'm gonna be communicating with my Blazor application, as well as the shared library, which is going to be helping me to share some of the classes between those two projects. So it's going to be quite simple. I'm going to put this .NET new Blazor WASM, and just a point here that I would like to emphasize here is we're not utilizing Blazor server, we're utilizing Blazor WASM, which is going to be based on the WebAssembly. So it's not so the actual Blazor file is going to be basically living inside our browser. We're not going to be utilizing the version that's going to exist on our server. So that's something really important for us to understand. So there's two different types of Blazor. We have Blazor server and we have Blazor WebAssembly. And for this video, we're going to be utilizing the Blazor WebAssembly version, where basically we're going to be creating like a single page application. We can think about it like that, like an Angular app which is going to live inside our browser. So once I have specified what type of application I want to create, the next step I want to give it the name, and of course it's going to be a Formula 1 application, and then I'm going to give it as hosted. Hosted means that I'm going to be able to create my API as well as my client side simultaneously. So let's create this. Perfect. Now we can see it's created successfully, and all I'm going to do is navigate to this application and open it up in Visual Studio Code. Yes, I do trust this. Let's see how this looks. Okay, great. So the first thing, of course, I want to do is I'm going to open my terminal and let's install the extension. And do I want this? Build assets missing Formula 1. Don't ask again. Okay, let's install this. And perfect. So now when this is installed, all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to go to my server application, so cd server, and I'm just going to type .NET build. Actually, let's do it in the root directory. So .NET build, and we can see it's building here, and basically it's build succeeded. Now if I do .NET run, it's not, so I need to go to my server, .NET run, and the run here will basically allow me to have both of my client side and my server side running. So I'm gonna take this port and I'm just gonna open up in a browser. So inside my browser, I'm just gonna put it here, and we can see that I have a default Blazor application, which basically it was created all of a sudden for me. For example, I did not do anything. So this is all boilerplate code that whenever I create a new Blazor application, it creates for me. we can see that it contains all of the right information. So basically it contains a menu, it contains a nice title, it contains a nice interface. So it's a good boilerplate code where we can actually start and build on top in order for us to create our application. And now that I can see that my application is running, if I could fetch data, we can see that it's connecting to my API and getting basically some kind of data from there. We have a counter, which means that there's some kind of logic running here. And lastly, our homepage, which is basically a full summary that welcome to our application. So that's a very good intro. So now let's go back to Visual Studio Code and let's stop this application. So the first thing we need to do right now is we need to add some packages in order for us to allow our API to communicate with our, in order for us to allow our API to actually communicate with our Postgres database. So we need to install the entity framework package, the Postgres package, and then we're going to be configuring them. So it's going to be .NET add package np GSQL entity framework core postgres QL npg SQL. Yeah, that should be fine. Okay, great. Now I need to install the entity framework one. So .NET add, how does it look there? Let's make this a bit bigger. Let's put clear. And let's make this a bit higher. Okay. Again, so .NET add package Microsoft.entity framework core.design. Perfect. And lastly, I'm gonna put .NET add package Microsoft.entity framework core.tools. I'll just show it again once it's installed. So I'm just gonna clear it up so you can see the code for it. So it's gonna be like this. So it's gonna be .NET.add Microsoft add package Microsoft.entity framework core.tools. Okay, perfect. So once I have installed all of this, I'm gonna go to my server application, and I'm gonna see here that all of my web assemblies, or basically all of my packages, has been installed successfully. My Postgres, my tools, and my designs. Okay, perfect. So once we have done that, again, I'm gonna do the famous .NET build to make sure everything is running as it should be. Perfect. And now what I want to do is I want to just update my connection string here so I'm able to connect to my Postgres database. And I'm just going to put connection strings, and I'm going to call this sample db connection. And I'm just going to paste my connection string. Actually, let's put user ID equal Mohamad. And my password here is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then I'm gonna specify the server, which is gonna be localhost, and then I'm gonna let's move the space, and then I'm just gonna ask me about the port. So let's specify the port, and the port for Postgres is 4532, and then I'm gonna specify the database that I created. Let's go back to our terminal, and we can see here that, let's go up, it's called sample Blazor db1. So let's take this one here. And then finally, I'm gonna put my integrated security. Integrated security equal true. And lastly, I'm gonna put the pooling equal true. That's a simple connection string that I need for my application. Perfect. So once I have done all of that and my connection string is there, again, .NET build, everything is running, great. So the next step is inside my server here, I'm gonna be creating a new folder. And right now what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be creating my application DB context, and this is gonna be responsible for creating my database, as well as making sure that all of my configuration for my tables is actually reflected inside my database. So for this, I'm just gonna call it data. And here I'm just gonna be creating a new file, and this file I'm gonna call it API DB .cs, and first of all I'm going to specify the namespace, and it's going to be formula1.server.data, and then I'm going to put public class API DB context inherit from the DB context class, which is going to be provided for us by the packages that we have installed. And here I'm just going to fix those references. Perfect. And here all I'm going to be doing is just create a constructor, and this constructor is going to take the options, which is going to be DB context options, and here we need to specify what are they for the API DB context, and then we're going to say it's the options, and then we need to inject it into the base controller, and that's it. So of course we're going to add more stuff to it, but this is going to be should be enough for now in order for us to be able to continue working on this. So the next step is let us go to our program.cs here, and we need to inject our API DB context into the startup of our application. So the reason we do that is in order for our application to recognize that there's an API DB context available, as well it will be able to inject this into our DI container, so we are able to actually inject our API DB context into any controller that we want. And that's going to be a crucial part here. So we're going to be utilizing dependency injection in order for us to have our API DB context available inside our controllers. So back here, all we're gonna say is builder.services.add entity framework npsql. I'm gonna say here .add db context, and then I'm gonna put it's gonna be the API db context, and then we need to specify the options. I'm gonna put options. Let's put this on a new line so it will look a bit better. Yeah, options, and let's fix those references while we're at it. Okay, and I'm gonna put .use npg sql. Let's fix this reference as well. And now all we need to do is just specify the connection string, and for this let's put it in a different line. So here I'm just gonna create a new variable called connection equal, it's gonna be to builder.configuration.get connection string, and here I'm just gonna pass the name of my connection string, which is gonna be sample db connection. Okay, perfect. And then here I'm just gonna pass the connection string. Again, my favorite command, .NET build. Perfect, build succeeded. So now that we have created our API DB context, we have injected into our program.cs, and basically we have our connection string ready. The next step for us is we need to start creating our models, and this model is going to be for a Formula 1 driver, and basically it's going to be a very simple model. We're going to contain the name, the racing number, as well as the team, and that's it. So inside my server folder, I'm going to be creating a new folder, and this folder here I'm going to be calling it models. And inside my models folder I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call it driver.cs. Actually, I'm not going to create it here. I'm going to be creating it inside my shared folder because I want to be able to access through my client one. So inside my shared folder I'm going to be creating my models, and here I'm going to be able to create my new driver. So I'm going to call it driver.cs, and then of course it's going to be the namespace. It's going to be formula1.shared.models public class driver, and here it's going to be pretty straightforward. So first of all it's going to be the ID, it's going to be of int, then it's going to be the string, which is going to be the name, that's equal string.empty, and then we're going to put prop again string racing number equal again string.empty, and lastly we're gonna put the team. Pretty straightforward. So now that we have done that, also equals string.empty, So now that we have created our model and basically it's ready for us, what we're going to be doing is we need to go to our API DB context and just make sure that our API DB context knows about it. And for that, all we're going to be doing is I'm going to put public db set driver. I'm going to call it drivers, and then we get an asset. So let's fix this here. Perfect. So now my API DB context knows that there's a driver. Again, .NET build. Perfect. So what have we done here? So first of all, what we done is we have created our model and then we have injected into our API DB context. But with all of that, our database, we still don't know that there is going to be a drivers table inside of it. So the way that we're going to be able to do that is we need to create a migration file, and then we need to implement that migration file to the database. And Entity Framework makes it really easy for us to do that, which basically all we need to do is just code and basically execute 2 commands, which is going to be facilitated by the EF tool that we have installed, and then it's gonna do all of the heavy lifting for us. So inside my server, all I'm gonna put here is .NET EF migrations, and I'm just gonna call it initial underscore migration. Perfect. And then all I'm gonna put is .NET EF database update. Perfect, we can see it completed successfully. And now if I go to my DB browser, all I'm gonna be doing right now is just, I know it could be a bit small to read, but let's try it out. So Postgres here, the database is not gonna be Postgres, it's gonna be sample DB Blazor 1. So let's put that here. Oops, not all of that. Okay, and the password is gonna be 1234567 test connection. Wait, oh, Mohamad is the user, not Postgres. Okay, perfect. And now if I click on finish and I open this up, database, sample DB, schemas, public, tables, and I can see driver. I'm not able to zoom in, so I'm just gonna take a screenshot so I can zoom in on the screenshot so you can see it. And if you take a look at this, okay, as you can see here that my drivers table has been created, and you can see that this is under my sample DB Blazor 1 DB, and we have an entity migration table history, which is exactly what we need. So now that our database has been created successfully and our drivers table has been created, the next step is we're going to be creating our controller, because basically our controller is going to be responsible for sending all of the information from our database to our Blazor application, so it will be able to load. So basically what we're going to be able need to send is all of the drivers. We need to send a specific driver. We need to basically allow to add a driver, update a driver, as well as a delete a driver. So all of that will be facilitated by the controller that we're going to be creating. So let's do it right now. So I don't need this anymore, so let's delete it. I don't need this. So inside my controllers folder, I'm going to be creating a new file, and this file, all I'm going to be calling it is let's call it the drivers controller.cs. Pretty straightforward. So first of all, as always, the namespace, and it's going to be formula1.server.controllers. And then I'm gonna put public class drivers controller inherit from the controller base. And the reason inherit from the controller base and not from the controller, because basically here I don't need to utilize any views. I'm utilizing an API, and basically a controller base is a much more light version of the controller class, and basically it's the parent of the controller class, so it's much more better to utilize the controller base. And here, see, it's not happy with it because we need to add the references, so let's add it right now. Okay, great. So now that we have added the references, the first thing is we need to add some parameters. We're gonna say this is an API controller, and now we need to specify the route for it. we're gonna put /API /controller. So now that we have done all of that and we are able to basically build the application, let's build it. So do .NET build. Perfect. Now let us inject our API DB context to it. So it's gonna be private read only API DB context _ context, and we're gonna put the constructor, and it's gonna take API DB context as context, and then all we need to do is just inject it. And let's fix this here. Okay, great. So now we have done this. Again, the same thing as always, .NET build. Perfect. So the first method, or basically the first endpoint that I'm going to be creating, is going to be the get all drivers, and it's going to be a simple get statement where it's going to get all of the driver that exists inside my database. Pretty straightforward. So it's going to be HTTP get, and it's going to be public async task action result as a list of driver, and it's gonna get drivers, and basically I'm gonna return here, actually let's put var drivers equal awaits underscore context dot drivers dot toList async, and I'm going to return okay with drivers. Okay, let's see why it's not happy. So first let's fix this references task. Oh, forgot one of these. Okay, perfect. Now let's fix this. And let's fix this. Perfect. So now basically I'm able to get all of my drivers. The next one is I'm going to need to get a specific driver. So in case I want to edit it, I want to select a single driver, and based on that I'm going to get that only single driver. And this is going to be for edit purposes or for deleting purposes. So let's try this out. Here I'm going to put HTTP get again, but I need to pass my ID to specify the ID for that driver. Again, it's going to be public async task action result of driver, and then I'm going to call it get driver details, and it's going to be an int of an ID, and it's going to be var driver equal await underscore context dot drivers dot first or default async, and we're just gonna make sure that match the ID equal ID. And then all I'm gonna be doing right now here is if driver equal null, I'm gonna return not found. Else I'm gonna return okay with the driver. Quite simple. Again, favorite command, .NET build, building successfully, perfect. So now let's finish all of the controls. Let's just create the post, the update, and the delete. Since we're already doing the control, it makes sense to just complete it all. So we're gonna put now the post, HTTP post, public async task. It's gonna return let's say just return action result. We're not returning anything, we're just gonna return a 200. Actually, let's return uncreated, let's return action result for now. So we're gonna put create driver, and we're gonna take driver as in this case scenario. Of course we need to have a DTO, but in order for us to be able to save some time, we're not just gonna utilize the same object, but of course in real life scenario we need to have a DTO rather than the actual object inside the database, just an FYI. So here what we're gonna be doing is gonna put underscore context dot drivers dot add, and I'm gonna put the driver, and then I'm gonna put await underscore context dot save changes async, because basically first we added into our memory of the application, then we actually communicated with the database. And all we're gonna be doing here is return the driver. Okay, driver. So here we can just changes to created at action, and here we need to update this, so it will be first, let's say, name of what did we call it, get driver's detail. Then we need to pass the object, which is going to be driver, and lastly it's going to be the ID for it. We're going to put driver.id. I think that's a better implementation. Let's do .NET build just to make sure that's actually building as it should be. Perfect. Next we need to basically now do the update, and it's gonna be pretty straightforward. So for that we're gonna put HTTP put, and of course we're gonna pass the ID. We're gonna put public async task. Let's put the update as action result, because we're gonna return not found. And what I'm gonna say here is update driver, and we're gonna pass the driver, and we're gonna pass an int as an ID for that driver. Okay, so first things first is we need to find this driver. So of our driver exists equal await underscore context dot driver dot first or default async, and we're gonna match it here on the ID equal ID, and we're gonna say if driver exists equal to null, we're gonna be returning not found. As simple as that. Else what we're gonna doing is we're gonna update the driver exist value one by one. So first the name equal driver.name, then driver dot racing number equal driver.racing number. That here should be the driver exist. And lastly the team, so driver exist dot team equal driver dot team. And finally we need to save these changes, so await underscore context dot save changes async, and we're gonna be returning no content, which means that it has processed successfully. Okay, great. And the last action that we need to implement is gonna be the HTTP delete. So HTTP delete, again we need the ID, public async task. Again we're gonna return an action result, because again it should be no content. We're gonna say delete driver, we're gonna pass the int ID. Let's take the similar logic that we have implemented here. Let's close this first. Let's copy this logic. So if it doesn't exist, it means not found. And then if we want to remove it, we're gonna put underscore context dot drivers dot remove, and we're gonna remove that driver exist. And again we need to save these changes, await context save changes async, and return no content. Perfect, that's exactly what we want. So let's do a quick build now. Perfect. And let's do a quick summary of what we have done so far. So basically what we have done so far is pretty straightforward. First of all, what we did is we have configured our database, and then we have added our installed the packages that we need inside our application. We added our connection string, we have added our API DB context, we have injected this API DB context inside our program.cs, so it will be available for our DI containers. We added our models, then we have updated our API DB context with the models. Once we have done that, we have created our controller. Inside our controller, what we did is we created 5 actions, which is going to be the get all, get by ID, add, update, and delete. And basically this is going to be everything that we need to do from the API side. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be focusing our attention to the client side, which is going to be our Blazor application, where we're going to be actually adding all of the Blazor components in order for us to be able to communicate with this API, get all of the information that we need, and execute actions directly from there. So first things first, let us open the client. And here we can see, let us first explain the main structure for our Blazor application. So a Blazor application is going to contain, similar to a normal .NET application, a program.cs. And this program.cs is going to be basically the main file that's going to be executing whenever our application starts. So it's going to be basically responsible for bootstrapping the application, making sure that all of the services that we need are available inside our DI container. It's going to be responsible for making sure that all of the Blazor components are available, so on and so forth. This is going to be the main program.cs file, or basically the main file that's going to be executing when the Blazor application is going to be running. It's going to be similar to any of our normal .NET applications. So basically all it's going to be doing is just making sure that our application is running as it should be. And other than that, inside my folder structure, so instead of having controllers, because this is a client-side application, we don't have controllers, we have pages, and pages here represents the different functionalities that we currently have. So inside pages here, we can see that we have, first let's run it and compare it. So if I put .NET run, and if I go back to my web browser, and we can see here we have home, counter, and fetch data. And if I take a look at my pages, we have the index, which represent our home, fetch data, and counter. So we know that these basically pages represent the different sections that we currently have. So that's gonna be, so if I need to add a new page, it needs to go inside my pages folder. As well, similar if I have a ASP.NET MVC application, I have a shared folder where basically I have different shared resources. And for example, here I have the main layout where I can see that inside all of this, where I can specify the menu. So you can see here. So here, for example, if you want to see how this world works, for example, let me add a, I don't know, let's add an H1 here, say Mohamad app, and let me run this again. And if I come back here and I refresh, we should be able to see Mohamad app is now available on top. So we can see here that this is gonna be the main application, and this is the main layout page for us. So let me remove this, I don't need it. And again, for the main menu, we can see we're utilizing a component. So if we go to the main menu component, we can see that here is the main 3 menus. It's gonna be home, counter, and fetch data. So what I'm gonna be doing right now, I'm gonna create a new one, which is gonna be for the drivers. And here, href, I'm just gonna call it drivers. We're gonna create this page right now, it does not actually exist. And here, instead of fetch data, I'm just gonna call it drivers. And yeah, that should be it. Now, if I stop this application and run it again, if I go here, I should be able to see that I have a new drivers. Perfect. Let's see if we can change this to people. I think that's it. If not, it doesn't really matter. Just thought it will look nice. Yeah, perfect. So now these are the drivers. So now what I'm gonna be doing is I need to create my first drivers. And basically here we can think about the Razor page here. It's gonna be a page where actually contain HTML code, as well as gonna contain some C# code. So it's gonna be a fusion of these 2 pages together. So we don't create a normal HTML page, and we don't create a CS page, C# page. What we do create here is something called a Razor page. So for example, in our case, it's called drivers. So we create a file called drivers.razor, and this is where all of our Blazor applications, they're gonna, all of our Blazor file gonna exist. So inside my pages, I'm gonna create a new file. I'm gonna call it drivers.razor. And here, very simply, all I'm gonna have first of all, I'm gonna make sure that this page is allow navigation to it. So just to whatever I had inside my menu, so we can see here it's called drivers. Inside my drivers, my page declarative, I basically specified that this page is called drivers. So if anyone wants to navigate to it, they will be able to. If I don't put this right here, I will not be able to navigate to this page. And then all I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to put the page title. So I'm going to put this as drivers, and I'm going to put a H1. I'm going to say welcome to the drivers section. And now let's see this in action. So let me run, and let's come back here and refresh. And now if I click on drivers, we can see here first of all that I got the welcome to drivers, which means that this worked, the navigation, and we can see here that my title has been updated to drivers. Okay, perfect. So that's the first section. So in order for me to make this more dynamic, I need to pass some C# code, and this C# code is going to be either responsible for fetching data from my APIs, and basically if I need to do any validation on it, I can do it through my C# code. So lucky for me, Blazor allow me to add directly the C# code inside my page, or I can make it a separate file. It's a completely personal preference. I recommend to have it a separate file so we can have separation of concern, so we can make sure that the Blazor file will only have the UI stuff, and we can create a separate file with an extension of a C# file where it's actually gonna have all of the logic behind it. You can have it all in a single page. Blazor allows it. I'm just giving you like my own personal opinion here. So if I want to have all inside all of a single page, all I need to do is just put at code, and I can input my code here and it should work. But I'm not gonna be doing this here because I want to have the separation of concern. So what I'm gonna be doing here inside my pages, I'm just gonna create a new one called drivers.cs, and first of all, of course, the namespace is gonna be formula1.client.pages, and then I'm gonna put here public partial drivers, and that's it. Public class, sorry, partial class drivers. And now basically, instead of having all of my code inside my Razor, I can basically have it inside a different page. Again, it will work all of it inside the same file, but just for peace of mind, I just wanted to have this separation. So now that I have my page ready and I have my code placement ready, so right now what I want to do is I want to create a service inside my Blazor application, so it will be able to communicate with my API in order for it to get all of the information that it needs. And if I want to create a service here, it will be a good idea for me to create it in a way where I can actually inject it into the Blazor page, and basically from there be able to make it in a way which actually reusable across different pages. So what I'm going to be doing right now, I'm going to be creating a service which is going to call the driver service, which is going to be responsible for communicating with the API and executing all of the 5 actions that I have against my API. They get by ID, update, delete, and create. And once we have all of that, I'm able to use it inside my Blazor page. So what I'm gonna be doing here inside my client, I'm gonna create a new folder, and I'm gonna call it services. New folder, services, and inside the services I'm gonna have 2 classes, actually 1 interface and 1 class. So here I'm gonna call it driverservice.cs, and here again it's gonna be namespace formula1.client.services. It's gonna be public interface iDriver service. Perfect. And let me create the implementation for it. Again, the new file, driverservice.cs. It's gonna be again the namespace. It's gonna be driver formula1 dot client dot services public class driver service, and it's going to inherit from the I driver service, and that's it. Okay, perfect. So now that I have my interface as well as my implementation, it's time for me to actually implement this. So pretty straightforward. Inside my interface, I need to add 5 actions. So the first one is going to be task I enumerable driver, and it's going to be all as well. Let's make this nullable in case there's any problems. So let's fix this reference. Then it's going to be task driver, again nullable, get driver, and it's going to be int id. Then it's going to be task driver, I'm going to say add driver, which is going to pass here driver, and then we're going to put task boolean update. It's going to take a driver, and task boolean delete driver. Okay, so now that we have done that, now let's stop this and just do a quick .NET build. It's gonna fail. Actually, before we do that, let us do the implementation here, because I don't want it to fail. Because here we can see that my interface is not happy that we did not do any of the implementation. So just let me fix this here and start implementing this interface. So first of all, because I'm going to be doing an HTTP call, and basically because I need to call my API, what I need to do is I need to inject an HTTP service, and lucky for me, .NET will provide me with this service that I can actually utilize. So that's the first thing, and then basically what I need to do is implement these 5 different methods that I have here. So first of all, I'm going to put private read-only HTTP client underscore HTTP client. That's the first thing. Now I need to do is basically my constructor, and it's gonna be HTTP client. Client. We're just gonna call it HTTP client, and here what I'm gonna put is HTTP client equal HTTP client. Perfect. So now that I have the way that I'm going to be able to communicate with my API set, which is basically here is going to be my HTTP client, all I need to do right now is just start implementing this. So we're going to start by adding a driver. So let me remove this, and I'm going to make this async. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to make it try and a catch. EX. I'm gonna do this for all, so let me just copy paste them. Okay, let me just put console dot write line. I'm gonna put error, and let us use string interpolation. EX dot message. Yep. And then I'm gonna return null. Again, there is way better error handling, but again, just for simplicity's sake, I'm keeping it like this. Actually, instead of returning null, let's just throw EX. So just let me to copy this and do it here for all of these. Okay. Perfect. So now let's start implementing them one by one. So for the get all I need to do is first of all specify the JSON items that I want to get. So I'm going to put for item JSON equal string. Actually, it's going to be new string content. It's going to be JSON serializer serializer dot serialize, okay. And actually this is not here, see, already putting in the wrong location, so we need to working on the adding of the driver. Yeah, so let's fix this. So basically what we're doing here is we're serializing our driver, in order for us to convert it to a JSON file, so our API will be able to accept it. In order for me to do that, I need to pass here the driver, and then I need to specify the type of encoding that I want to utilize. So I'm just going to say encoding dot UTF. Let's fix this reference. UTF-8. And then lastly, I want to say the media type is going to be application JSON, because this is what we're going to be passing back. Okay, perfect. So now that we have done this, the next step is I want to send a request, as simple as that. So var response equal await underscore HTTP client dot post async. And here what I'm going to be doing is I need to specify the path for it, which is going to be API / drivers. And I'm going to pass the object, which is going to be item.json. And that's it. And now here I'm going to say if response dot is successful, so it means that it passed successfully. Basically what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be serializing the response back. So I'm going to put var response body equal await response dot content dot read a string async, and here that's the only part where we're going to be doing this. And then I'm going to put return await. Now we need to serialize it, JSON serializer dot deserialize, and it's going to be the driver, and we're going to pass the response body. And here we're going to see if we're going to any serialization options, and what we can see equal new JSON serialization options, and we can specify here that we want to property name case, okay, equal true. But why is this not happy? Okay, let me say here, just call this var driver equal, actually added driver, return added driver. So the main issue here is this should be read as stream, not as string. Okay, perfect. So that finishes up our first item inside our service. Why still not happy? Oh, okay. So here, in case it's we need to return null. Okay, great. So now that we have created our first, implemented our first action, or basically our first method, the next step is we're going to be doing it for the all. So it's going to be a much more simpler implementation. So all we need to do here is going to be put var API response equal await underscore HTTP client dot get stream async, and here I'm gonna pass what the endpoint is going to be API / drivers, and that's it. And now all we need to do is just analyze this response. So we can say if API response dot actually let's use it the other way. We're gonna put enumerable driver equal drivers equal API, actually await JSON serializer dot deserialize async, and I'm gonna get here a list actually of enumerable of driver, and then here all I need to do is just pass. So maybe I can take the same thing as I done here and implement it here. and here it should be the API response. Let's make this also nullable. Actually, let's make it as a var, it's even better. And lastly, all I need to do is just return the drivers. Perfect. So now that we have implemented the all, the next one is gonna be the delete. The delete also gonna be pretty straightforward. So instead of the delete, maybe instead of sending all of the driver, let's update it so we can send only the ID. So let's update the service here. So for the delete, we're gonna be sending an int ID. And then here, so now let's implement the delete functionality. It's gonna be pretty straightforward. We're gonna put var response equal await underscore HTTP client dot delete async, and here we need to specify the path, which is also, let's use string concatenation. We're gonna put API / drivers, and then we're gonna pass the ID, and here is gonna be ID. Perfect. And then we're gonna say here var response dot is successful. That's it, because that's all we need. And we need to, instead of var, sorry, we need to make return. Perfect. Now let's do the get driver. So this is gonna be also quite straightforward. So first of all, var API response equal await underscore HTTP client dot get stream async, and then here we need to specify what are we sending. So while I was editing this video before I uploaded, I discovered that the second part of that video did not work correctly. For some reason, the screen recorder did not capture everything as it should. So what it did is basically you can hear my voice, but the screen was not recording perfectly. So from now on, it's going to be the re-recording of that second part of the video. So if you see any discrepancy, that's why. So please enjoy. So now let's continue getting our driver. So it's going to be var response equal await underscore HTTP client dot get stream async. We're gonna pass here our URL. It's gonna be / API drivers / the driver ID. And then now we need to actually serialize our response. So we're gonna put var driver equal await JSON serializer dot deserialize async. Gonna be driver, and then we need to make sure that we're passing the right response. I'm gonna put the new JSON serializer option, and here we're gonna put the property name case insensitive equal true. Perfect. So once we have done that, oops, we forgot the semicolon here. So once we have done that, we need to basically just return the driver. Great. So that's for the get driver. Our last method that we need to implement is the updates. It's gonna also pretty straightforward. So first of all, let us just take the same try catch, and let's basically update this from the inside. Okay. So first of all, we need to serialize our driver. If we go back to the post, we can just take whatever it is. Where is it? This is it. So let's take all of this, and let's just put it here. So we don't really need any of this. All we're going to be returning is response.is successful. So that's going to be it. And then here what we're going to be doing also, we need to make it as a put rather than a post. And we need to pass the ID of the driver as well at the end. So here we need to make sure it's going to be driver.id, and we need to make sure that we're enabling string interpolation here. So if we go back to our terminal now, and all I'm going to be doing is .NET build. Oops, I need to go to the server. .NET build. Perfect. So now that we have completed implementing our services, it's time for us to actually inject it in our program.cs. And once we inject in our program.cs, it will be actually available for us to utilize inside the application, because basically it will be available to be utilized from within the DI container. And that's why we really need to inject it inside our program.cs. So let's add it here. It's going to be builder.services.add scoped. And it's going to be driver service and driver service. Perfect. And now if we do another .NET build, perfect, we can see the application is building successfully. Let's see, a build succeeded. Great. So the next step for us is we're going to go back to our drivers here. And what we want to do is we want to basically have a way where we can actually inject the service that we just created. But because we are utilizing Blazor as well, and we don't have the normal life cycle of a normal ASP.NET application, the way we actually inject a service to our Razor page is by utilizing an attribute called inject. And this basically will work as if it was a constructor injection for our dependency injection. So once we add that attribute inject, Blazor will know that this needs to be injected while the page is actually loading, so it will inject it inside the constructor and it will allow us to utilize it. So that's something to keep in mind whenever we want to inject any services inside our Blazor pages, is to actually utilize the inject attribute. So here we're gonna put inject, and then we're gonna make it private iDriver service, gonna call it driver service, get and set. Perfect. And now what we also want to do is, because we're going to be getting a list of drivers that we want to pass into the Razor page, we want to have some kind of a list here where we can actually utilize. We can think about it as if it's like a view model or like a binding model that we can actually share between the C# code as well as our Razor code. So for that, we're going to put a public enumerable driver underscore drivers equal, actually we need to put the getter and the setter, and then equal new list of driver. Perfect. So now that we have provided this list of drivers, the next step is we need to tap into the life cycle of our Blazor page. So in the life cycle here, we want to make sure that whenever actually we are loading our page, what do we need to do? Once we are loading that page, we need to load our drivers. So basically, whenever the page is loading, we need to utilize a driver service. It will connect to our API, get the information that we want, and once we get it back, we need to load it back into the view. And all of that needs to happen whenever the page is loading. And for us to do that, there is a built-in method that we can actually override in order for us to accomplish this. So let's see how that's done. So first things first, it's going to be protected async override, and then here we need to specify what's going to return task, and then we need to specify the name of that method itself. So it's going to be on initialized async. And here all we'll have to do is just first of all code var, I'm going to call it API drivers equal driver service await. It's going to be driver service dot add driver, actually that all, not all. Okay. And what we're going to be doing here, if API drivers dot any, it means that it contains, and API drivers not equal to null, we're gonna just make underscore drivers equal API drivers. Perfect. Let's switch these up. So first we make sure we're setting not null before we check the any. Perfect. So now let's just do a .NET build. Perfect, we can see it's building successfully, and we can see that we got the build succeeded. Great. So now that we have done that, let's go focus on the front end of this. So what we're going to be doing here first is we're going to be creating a table. I'm going to give it a class table, and I'm going to put here my t head, and then I'm going to put my tr, and then th, and then we're going to be first the id. So let's just copy this. Okay, so we're gonna have first the driver name, the racing number, and then we're gonna have here the team. And lastly, we're gonna have a manage button in case we wanna edit the driver. Perfect. So now we have ID, name, racing number, team, and the manage. So now after the t-head, we're gonna put the t-body, and here I'm gonna put a tr. Actually, before we implement this, let's do a for each here. So we're gonna put that for each, and here we're just gonna go through the drivers, because basically here we're gonna be looping through the drivers list, and then inside of the for each, I'm gonna put my tr. And I'm just gonna put here the first TD, which is gonna be, actually let's make it all on a single line, at item.id. So it's gonna be the first thing. Let's make it 2, 3, 4. So then we're gonna have the name. Then we're gonna have the racing number. Then we're gonna have the team. And lastly, we're gonna have the manage, which is gonna leave it empty for now. Okay, perfect. Let's stop this and let's run it. And let's go back to my web browser. Zoom in. And as you can see here, I already added some information inside my database, and we can see here that's actually loading it correctly. So we can see I have 2 drivers which are available for me to utilize directly. I can see their IDs, their name, their racing number, their team, but I don't have the manage yet. Okay, perfect. This means that the first part of our application is actually working. I'm able to actually connect to my database, get the information that I want, process it inside my service, and then sending it back to the view in order for me to display it in the table, which is the exact behavior that we want. So now that we have covered this, the next step is we're going to be seeing the method of how we can actually create a new driver, and or we can actually edit the driver's information. So that's going to be the main focus for the next part. So right now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating an actual link where we can actually go to a new page. So first of all, we're going to be creating that page, which is going to be calling driver's details. And then we're going to be creating a link which we can actually allow us to go from the driver's page to that page. So inside pages here, I'm just going to create a new file. I'm going to call it driver's details.razor. And then I'm going to create another page, new file. And it's going to also be called driver details.cs. So for the CS here, when you have to provide also the namespace, similar that we have done before, it's going to be formula.client.pages, and then I'm going to put public class, partial class, excuse me. And then here I have to put the name of it, so it's going to be driver details. And that should be it. And here what we're going to be doing, okay, why it's not happy? So it's drivers, oh, here it's called drivers detail. Let's fix this. Let's make it a driver detail. Okay, that's fine. So here what all I'm going to be doing is I'm going to take whatever I have here. So the page initiative, so I'm going to change this here. I'm going to make it a driver details And this is basically if I want to create a new driver, but if I already have a driver, I need to pass the ID to it. So I'm going to put /ID, perfect. And then here, all I'm going to say for now, just an h1 manage driver. That should be it. And all I'm going to be adding here, let's see, driver details. That should be it. Let's double check it is the right one. So let's do rename. Yeah, it's the same thing here as well. Okay, why is this a bit annoyed? On initialized async. Yeah, that should be working fine. Let's do .NET build. It's building. Just Visual Studio Code is acting a bit weird, as always. So right now, all I'm gonna be doing here is I'm just gonna add a new href, which is gonna allow me to navigate from the list of all drivers to create a new drivers. And for me to do that, I'm gonna be creating an A. It's gonna be href. I'm gonna give it a class, btn-success. And then I'm gonna say add new driver. And here, in order for it to work, all I need to do is just pass the right parameter where I'm allowed to actually navigate between Razor pages. And it's gonna be, first of all, the @ sign. And then here I'm gonna put the parentheses and then the string interpolation. And then here I need to define the page name, which is gonna be driver details. So now let's stop this and let's run this again. So .NET build and then .NET run. And let's go back to my web browser. And here all I'm going to do is refresh, and we can see I have a new button called add driver. And if I click on this and it works, I should see an empty page with a title. It says error. Let's see what's the error. Inspect. Let's see what the error that we got. Okay, that's fine. We did not define the ID yet, so let's define that ID. So let's go back here inside our Razor page, and all I'm gonna say right now is parameter, because that's gonna be what we're gonna be passing. And then I'm gonna define a public string ID get and a set, and that's it. Now let's stop this and run it again. Oh, I have a typo. Parameter, I think that should be fine. Yes, that's exactly it. And right now, if I run this, if I go back to my web browser and let's go back to drivers and I click on add a new driver, it's still okay. Let me just clean .NET run, and now it works. So here we can see all of the drivers, and add a new driver, we can see manage driver. Perfect. So now that our linking is working and we can see that we have a new page, in order for us to actually create a new driver, we're going to start populating this, creating the form that we need, and basically making sure that all of our services are going to be wired up correctly. We're going to be utilizing here also something called the navigation service, in order for us to be to move back from this page into the main page where we can see all of the drivers. We're going to be injecting our driver service so we can actually connect to our API, update the driver or add a new driver. We're going to be also here implementing different types to handle error handling. So in case the form that we are submitting, there was any issues when submitting it, we're going to execute that. Else, we're going to be basically just submitting the form correctly and returning back to the list of drivers. So let's continue on this. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code. And here the first thing that we want to do is we want to basically inject our services. So we're going to put private driver driver service. I'm gonna call it driver service. It's gonna be a get and a set, and then let's fix this reference. and then we're gonna go back. I'm gonna put inject. This is gonna be another service that we're gonna be utilizing, which is gonna be the navigation manager, and I'm gonna just call it navigation manager. Very simple. I'm also gonna create a variable. I'm just gonna call this message. So I'm gonna put protected string message, and this, in case there's any problem, I could just utilize this variable to push it back to the view. So it's gonna be string.empty for now. We don't have anything in it, and yeah, that should be it. Let's see. Okay, so now what we're gonna be also doing is we need to have a list of the sorry, a variable for the driver, because that's what we're gonna be pushing. So I'm gonna let's put it also here. Protected driver. I'm gonna call it driver equal new driver, and let's do here the getter and the setter. Okay, and let's fix this. Perfect. Let's do .NET build. Perfect. So now that's running. The next step for us is we need to actually add here the method that we're going to be basically loading whenever the page is loading. So similarly, it's going to be uninitialize async, and this method here, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be checking if that request which is coming in, if it contain an ID, it means that we're going to be updating the driver. If it does not contain an ID, it means that we're going to be actually creating a driver. And for this logic here, we're going to be simply checking an if-else statement inside of that method. So protected async override task on initialized async, and here all we're going to be doing saying if string.empty null or empty for the ID. This means here we're going to be adding a new driver, else it's going to be updating a new driver. Okay, perfect. So once that is done, let's see how we can continue with this. So if we are updating a driver, what we need to do is we're going to put var driver ID, because we want to get the information from our API. We're going to put convert.toInt32, and here we're going to pass the ID, and then basically from here we're going to put var API driver equal await driver service dot get driver, and we're going to pass the driver ID, and then we're going to say here if API driver not equal to null. We're just gonna make sure that our our driver equal API driver. Okay, let's just use a quick build here. .NET build. Okay, great. So now that we have done this is the main initial step. Other than that, let's go back here to our Razor details, and I just want to do some nice management here. So I'm gonna put at if string.empty or null for the ID. I just want to put the page title if it is null. I'm gonna say add new driver, and I want to put an h1 which says add new driver, and then I'm gonna put else. So for the H1, I'm just gonna keep it as manage driver, but for the page title, I'm just gonna also update it to manage driver. Okay, let's see that in action. So .NET run. Perfect. Now let's go back to my web browser and let's refresh. Add a new driver. Perfect. If I come here, add a new driver. Okay, great. So that means that everything is running exactly as we want right now. So now let's go back to our driver details page, which we already are in, and that is updated. Let's create our form, and let's create here the different buttons that we need, the different fields that we need, as well as the form, which is going to be utilizing the Blazor edit form. So let's get started. So the first thing here I want to add is basically a div of class equal row, and here this is going to be belong to Bootstrap, so that's fine. And here what I'm going, then I'm going to be creating the edit form, and then basically inside the edit form there's going to be different parameters that I need to provide. So the first one is going to be the model that I want to bind to. It's going to be at driver, and then I need to specify the actions. So lucky for me, when it comes to Blazor, we can implement what happens if a form is submitted successfully and what happens if the form submitted fails. So we have two methods that we can actually implement, and we need to hook them up inside the edit form sections inside our attribute. So that means whenever a form submission fails, we can go to that method. In case it is succeeded, we go to different methods. So inside here, all we're going to be putting is on valid submit. We're going to create this method, does not exist right now. I'm going to put handle valid request, and I'm going to put another one on invalid submit. I'm going to put at handle failed request. And then now let's create our form. So it's going to be pretty straightforward. Div class form dash group, and then here I'm going to put my label class equal call dash md dash 3. I'm going to call here the name of the driver, and then I'm going to put basically an input text as simple as that. Input text, and here we're going to have to bind it into the driver that we have. This we shouldn't have here an equal sign. Okay, so here we need to bind it to the driver. It's first of all, let's give it a class, and it's going to be call dash md dash 8, and it's going to be form dash control, and then let's give it directly the binding. It's going to be at bind value, equal, then we need to specify it at driver.name. And then what we're going to be doing, we're just going to copy this for the rest. So for racing number, we're going to put here the racing number, and then for the team, we're going to put the team. And then what I'm going to be doing here as well, I'm just going to create a new BR, and this BR here just for spacing. We're going to get another div class equal, again form group, and here it's going to utilize for the buttons. So for the buttons here, they're going to be basically 3 buttons: the save, the go back, as well as the delete. So the save is going to be utilized either if we're going to be creating a new driver or updating it. The go back also going to be utilized for all scenarios, but the delete is going to be only available if we're actually updating the driver. That's the only case. So we need the condition, so only when that ID is available, we're going to be showcasing that button. So the first things first, we're going to put button type submit. So because this submit button is going to be responsible for submitting it, and it's going to trigger these two method based on if it's successful or failure. And then we're going to put the class. We're going to put btn dash warning, and then we're going to put the save driver, and then I'm going to put another button. Actually, let's make it as an A, and I can put at on click. We're gonna hook it up to a method that we need, and in this case, gonna be back at go to drivers. It's pretty straightforward. Class. It's gonna be btn dash primary, and I'm gonna go say back. And lastly, similar to what we had done before, I'm gonna put at if string.empty or null for ID. If it's not empty or null, actually we need to showcase the delete button. So again, we need to make it as an A at on click equal to, I'm gonna put delete driver. I'm gonna say here delete driver, and just give it a class equal btn dash danger, so it will appear in red. And let's put a br here so we can have a bit more space, and that should be it. Okay, it's not gonna work out right now, so let's start by actually creating these three methods. Let's start by the easiest methods, which is gonna be the go back to drivers and the invalid request. So if we go back to our driver detail.cs, let's add these methods after the onInitialize in sync. So first of all, it's gonna be protected, void, I'm gonna put handle failed requests. And all I'm gonna be doing here is just utilize that message that we have created previously. And I'm gonna say something went wrong, form not submitted, and I'm gonna add a semicolon and tell you what, inside my driver razor here, I'm just gonna add a message at the end. I'm gonna put another BR. I'm just gonna display the message in a paragraph. And here I'm just gonna give it a styling of red. So font, actually let's just give it color red. Yeah. So that's gonna be for the first one here. We can see it already went. The other one is gonna be go back to drivers. So again, it's gonna be protected, void, go to drivers. And here we're gonna be utilizing the navigation manager .navigate to. And here all we need to specify is the path for it, and in this case it's going to be drivers / drivers. Perfect. And now we have the delete driver, so let's implement the delete driver. Also, it's going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to put protected async task delete driver. And first of all, we're going to be saying if the ID is not empty, so if string.empty or null for the ID, we're gonna put var driver ID equal convert to int 32. We're gonna pass here the ID, and then we're gonna put var result equal it's gonna put await driver service .delete, and all we need to pass is the driver ID. Perfect. And then we're gonna say if result is successful, we're gonna navigate back. So navigation manager to navigate to / drivers. Else we're gonna update the message equal, we're gonna put something went wrong, driver not deleted. Okay. So now that's leave us with the last method that we want to implement, which is gonna be here the handle valid requests. So let's do this right now. So let's do this at the end. So protected async void handle valid requests. So the first of all is we need to check if the ID is empty or not, similar to this, because basically here it's we're gonna be able to know if it's gonna be an add or an update. So the first of all is gonna be an add. Here we're gonna be add a driver, else it's gonna be update driver. So let's do the add part. So we're gonna put pretty straightforward var result equal await driver service dot add driver. Perfect. We're gonna say if result not equal to null. We're gonna use the same logic here, but we're gonna update the message. So instead of something went wrong, driver not added. Other than that, we need to update the driver, which is also pretty straightforward. I'm gonna put var result equal await driver service dot update, and then we're gonna pass the driver. And let's do the same thing, but here this is a boolean, so if it is true we're gonna go back and we're gonna say here it's not updated. Perfect. So let's stop this and let's do a .NET build. And as you can see here, that's building successfully. And if I go back to my web browser and I refresh this, you can see failed. Oh, we just did not do a run. Still early morning today, so okay, let's see what's gonna happen now. Perfect, we got our name, racing number and team. So let's add George Russell, driver number 63, team Mercedes F1 AMG F1, and let's save driver. We can see it got added, George got added successfully, and we navigated back. Exactly. So now we're still missing the added button, which is pretty straightforward. So let's go back to our Visual Studio Code and let's go to our racer details and let's add the manage drivers. So it's going to be driver, not driver's details, and we're going to add this here. So first of all, let's copy this to make it easier for us. And here, all we're going to be doing is just put this. So here we're going to just put edit instead of add a new driver. And for this one here, all we're going to be doing is just going to add the ID. So it's going to be item.id. So let's stop this and see how it works. So right now, let's go back here. Let's refresh. We got the button. Let's make this as a warning, just because yellow means for editing. So let's stop this. Let's run it again. It's running. Let's refresh. We got it as edit, and now if I click on it, I'm basically able to see Lewis's information. Let me make this as Petronas. Let me save the driver, and then we can see that team got updated. If I click on edit, remove Petronas, save driver, saved. Let's update George. Let's put here also Petronas, save, perfect. And let's go to Valtteri and let's see, I want to delete Valtteri, deleted. Let's add Valtteri back. So Valtteri Bottas, racing number 77, Alfa Romeo, save driver, perfect. So basically here we are able to create a full CRUD. So basically we have the full operation, adding a new driver, editing an existing driver as well as deleting a driver. Let's check the back button, and the back button also work. And we can see here that basically what we have accomplished here is a full life cycle of a CRUD operation. Get all, we're able to load all of the drivers. Add, we are able to add the new driver. Edit, we are able to update a driver information. Delete, we are able to delete a driver as well. Get by ID, we're getting a single driver's information. And here we can see that within Blazor, we are able to actually utilize, in this case, our web API in order for us to get the information. But the nice thing about Blazor is we don't really have to use a .NET API in order for us to get the information. We can use a Node API, Python, so on and so forth. It's a very flexible where we can actually utilize it, because basically Blazor here is a client-side application. It does not really matter what API we're connecting to, as long as it's providing us with the information that we want. And let's do a quick summary of what we have covered today. So the first item that we have covered today is we basically set up our application. Then we have created our project. Inside our project, we have focused first on creating our API and all of the endpoints that's needed in order for us to create our application. And once that is done and we were able to create our application successfully, then we basically configured all of our CRUD operations inside our API. We created our API DB context. We mapped it out to our database, so on and so forth. And basically we had a full API set and ready. And once we have completed our API, we move back to our Blazor application, our client-side application. We created the get all drivers page first, where we can actually see all of the drivers. And then basically we hooked up our driver services. We're actually able to communicate with our API through the driver services. And once that is done, we were able to actually create the edit and the add and the delete functionalities for the drivers. So I hope this video was helpful. Please like, share and subscribe if you like this video. It will really help the channel. As well, if you'd like to support me, please consider supporting me on Patreon or buying me a coffee. With that said, have a great day and thank you very much for watching.